Hey there, athletes. Coach John Ferry here from Team Wilpers. Very excited to welcome you here to our athlete briefing number 1 for the 2024 Holiday Run Challenge. Talk a little bit about the main goal of this challenge here, which is to improve the result of that 20-minute distance test over the course of a 6-week period. However, here in our holiday in particular, we have a couple sub-goals. So one is over the course of the next 6 weeks, we want to make sure we're taking this time to work and improve our threshold, very versatile energy zone in the running world in particular. Then our sub goal here is that we want to make sure to take this time over the holiday season here when people really tend to fall off their fitness routine, tend to fall off their structured training, and instead stay accountable, continue to get a little bit stronger during this time period. So there are absolutely plenty of excuses during this time of year to kind of get off your game, off your routine a little bit. So we want to stay accountable as a group here together to make sure that we're using and being productive during this time. The challenges in our challenge structure in general right now are actually created in large part due to an issue that Matt and I saw years ago, which is that people would have these really productive summer and fall running campaigns, and things would tend to fall apart in the winter, and in spring we were starting all over again. So brought this kind of year-round training approach, and this being a very important season, the off season for a lot of people, which doesn't necessarily mean being off of all training. It just means a little bit of a different style usually than maybe what was happening during summer and fall. But we want to once again be very productive during this time of year. So this challenge is going to include some endurance, aka easy running, one of our bread and butter of all running. Certainly some strides, a little bit of threshold pace workouts, and then some VO2 max intervals kind of sprinkled in there as well over the course of time. But as I mentioned before, a heavy focus for sure on the threshold energy zone here as part of this challenge. I want to talk a little bit about the website. So hopefully everyone is set up on their online portal. They received their schedule this morning on Friday morning. So your schedule comes out on Friday morning, and then we're here discussing the week ahead on Friday evening. So that schedule has portal has a few important pieces of information. One is going to be your pace box. So these are going to be the paces for your workouts throughout the challenge here. You have to put the result of that 20-minute distance test into the pace box using the gear icon that's going to generate your paces for the rest of the challenge. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. It'll also have the check box. So next to every single workout, there will be a box to check off saying, I did this workout. So I am a big proponent of chasing a 100% completion percentage over the course of the challenge. For this challenge in particular, it is even more important than ever because I mentioned our sub goal of this challenge is not only to get a little bit faster over the period, improve threshold, but as much as anything, stay consistent during this period, chasing that 100% completion percentage of what you kind of set out to achieve here going into week 1. So make sure to go into that web portal, check the box, make sure you're tracking that 100% completion percentage. Let's talk about our run number 1, which is our distance test here at the kickstart of this week. So it's quite a simple test. It's as far as you can run in a 20-minute time span. So this can be done indoors, outdoors, track, road, etc. I sort of would recommend it, and this might be changing in the wintertime, to do this test where you plan to do most of your workouts. For me, most of my workouts are outside, so I'm going to always do the test outside. If all of your workouts are inside, it might make sense, even if you've tested outside before, to test inside so you've got kind of proper calibration going into the cold weather season here. You want to warm up well, you want to start hard and finish hard. So although this can be a negative split run, it's certainly not designed as a progression run. I know people familiar with maybe a Matt FTP test knows he kind of goes harder every 5 minutes. I actually wouldn't recommend that. I think a little bit more even pacing across the scope of it is probably best. So I'm gonna loop back to some strategy here in a second, but I want to take a moment to talk about why performance testing, why we go through this process time and time again at kind of these start and ends of the challenges. So It's a nice way to measure progress without a doubt, but simply it is the most accurate way to determine current fitness and assigning accurate pacing zones to go along with it. So it takes into account your running efficiency, determination, mental toughness, and ultimately pace as well. And these kind of are a combination of things that are going to dictate how fast you end up running outside and for how long. And so why is it important that we know this information? Is really it comes down to this. It's a return on investment, if you will. So you spend all this time training. It's cold, it's dark, we're going into winter, you're away from friends and family, and so we want you to get the most out of it for that time that you're putting into it, the time, effort, and investment. And so if you're training too fast, you're running too fast in your workouts, the workouts are going to be hard, they're going to beat you up, you're going to carry a ton of fatigue from day to day that's going to be hard to recover from. It's just not going to be ultimately that productive. Similarly, if you're running the workouts too slow, you're not going up to your potential. It's kind of a similar and different scenario where it's probably harder than easy, but not hard enough to ultimately get any better or get any adaptation out of that workout. So you're just carrying extra fatigue for no particularly great reason, which is not what we want. We want you to get the most productivity out of that time spent and effort spent. So that's why we do this performance testing to make sure things are quite calibrated here. And it's important to kind of meet you where you are today, as opposed to maybe where you were a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, or as many of us have found out, we just kind of used the training paces from our fastest ever times and never recalibrated them as our lives changed, our age changed, etc. So from time to time, it takes a little bit of a humble pie and a reset to ultimately train where you are today. And for athletes at all levels, that is ultimately the better way to go, instead of thinking you're going to train yourself back up to the paces that you were before. You might, but we still need to use the paces that correspond with current day fitness. So just a couple tips on just preparing for the test here. Make sure to rest up in advance. This is something you want to give yourself a good shot at success. You don't want to come in when you're tired, fatigued, after a strength workout in the morning, etc. So make sure to rest up, give yourself a good shot at success, come in fresh. Rule number 2, don't overthink it. We can get in our own ways a lot. It's really quite simple. It's run as far as you can in 20 minutes, stop, record the results. So it doesn't have to be too complicated. Rule number 3 on this one, however, is no holding back, no sandbagging it. It is the test that dictates the paces that are assigned for this challenge and potentially other challenges in the future. So you want to make sure you're giving it a good, honest effort to get the most out of it. Remember, data out is as good as data in. So we need that accurate input of data early here. So a little bit on strategy. We haven't talked about strategy in a while. In the past, we've talked about negative splits, even splits, positive splits, etc. And ultimately, I find that not that helpful, to be quite honest. So I thought I would talk a little bit about how I prepare for my own performance tests, and hopefully that relates a little bit better. So 20-minute distance test is sort of an odd distance, right? Like it's an odd, kind of a nebulous time. I've kind of mentioned in the past, it's not even really the right time for a threshold test, which is ultimately what we're doing. That's probably a 30-minute test, but nobody wants to do that. So we've kind of figured out a 20-minute test that does pretty well. But if you're like anything like me, I'm much more comfortable in a distance-based approach. So when I think about the 20-minute test, what I ultimately am doing is trying to estimate for myself, which is a little bit of a challenge, what the distance I think I can achieve during that 20 minutes. And just for example's sake, for me, it ends up being in or around the general 5K vicinity is what ultimately I'm shooting for. So while if you ask me what my 20-minute distance test pace was, I really have no idea. But I do know my 5K pace. It's a race that I've run more often. I use it to train. It's just one that I'm more comfortable with. So what I'm really looking to do is not run as far or fast as I can in 20 minutes. What I'm looking to do is to see if I can get to the 5K point before my 20-minute clock expires. That is the goal I have set for myself. And if I can, then I'll continue on for what will not be that much longer, maybe a minute at maximum, to complete the 20 minutes and see how far I can get. But really my goal was to see if I could get to the distance goal I set for myself before that 20-minute clock expires. So for those who race outside or, are more familiar with that, I like that approach. For me, it gets me out of my head of just counting down the seconds, which I find very, very challenging, not a lot of fun. And instead, I'm shooting for a distance and really wishing I had more time in order to make sure I got there and achieve my goal of that test. So hopefully that's maybe a different way just to kind of reframe the expectation of this test a little bit, have a lot more fun with it, is set a distance goal for yourself that you think you can achieve during that time and go and try to beat that distance goal. So obviously the same principles apply for any paces, any distance, etc. Set the goal, what you think is reasonable, what you'd be happy with, and go see if you can't surprise yourself. And if not, we'll try again in 6 weeks. Option B, however, which is on the table, is if you just tested and you feel great about your test at the end of the last challenge, then by all means, not a lot has changed in 2 weeks. In particular, if you were using the bridge program. So get in there, use the test result from the end of the last challenge, and potentially test at the end of this challenge as we come into the top of the new year. However, option B, little progression run. So this is gonna, if you're retesting or if you're not retesting, you're gonna use the old paces, just a little opportunity, as we've done a lot of times in the past, to come in, retry out those paces, make sure things are comfortable, feeling confident, and those paces are still aligned going into the next 6 weeks. 2 goals of the progression run: get a little bit faster as the run progresses, and I want you to finish just a little bit faster than half marathon pace, approaching that threshold energy zone. Run number 2, jumping into the threshold, my favorite style of workout, threshold workouts. I think probably the most versatile workout in our running repertoire. Important on races all the way from the mile to the marathons. So threshold workouts, an absolute, as I said, a favorite of mine. As I mentioned, it's going to be a big target of this challenge to go and improve here at Threshold. So I want to talk very briefly about some of the Threshold workout characteristics here. So things that I associate with Threshold is ultimately relatively long work periods to relatively short recovery periods. So here in week 1, we're looking at 4 minutes on to 1 minute off. I'd call that like a work to recovery ratio of 4 to 1. When you think about shorter distance intervals, let's say, short fast intervals like anaerobic capacity intervals, we're looking at a work to recovery ratio, something more like 1 to 1. So for every minute on, a minute off. So it's higher intensity, but equal parts work to recovery. And Threshold, a little bit different, a little bit slower pace, longer periods of work, shorter recovery. So we're starting here at 4 to 1 and these 4-minute sets. It does mean you need to make sure to utilize that recovery to get to kind of collect yourself, get recomposed, and get back into the next set. They're going to go by quite quickly, so you want to make sure to focus on going to easy effort. Easy effort doesn't always correspond with easy pace, so think about this as easy effort. So sometimes that means dropping 2-3 minutes per mile slower than maybe your easy pace range if you need that time to recover and get ready for the next interval. That is 100% okay. Key run number 3 is our endurance run. Nice and easy start to finish here. Tons of cardiovascular benefit from legitimate aerobic running. So don't be afraid to slow this down. Take it nice and easy. Have fun with it. The main goal is just to run aerobically for 45 minutes and enjoy your experience. Experienced runners, or especially runners that are focusing on some endurance races coming into the winter and spring, absolutely feel free to extend this out longer. This would be your count definitely as your weekly long run. So I'm going to jump into a couple questions that came up via the group here. And the first question was, can you talk a little bit about strength training during the off season? How much emphasis should we place on total body versus targeting the running specific areas we would all think of? So I'm a big fan of strength training year round. I think it's a huge and incredibly valuable addition to runners' schedules. People who just want to stay healthy and active for longer, strength training, more than anything, is going to be the secret to success on that. So there absolutely is an off season and an on season when it comes to strength training. And in the off season, really, I think the things that might change is maybe the frequency of your training. You might strength train a little bit more often, where on season, if you're doing more running or harder running, it's harder to get those sessions in. A little bit harder to deal with that fatigue. You might reduce back a little bit, but I think it's very common in the off season to do maybe more sessions. Similarly, you can tweak the structure of those workouts a little bit, potentially include heavier weight. You don't have to worry about carrying that residual fatigue into a key long run or a key structured workout. There might be some residual fatigue that you carry into workouts, but it's just a little bit lower priority workout now than it would be in the middle of your peak season. So in terms of kind of total body versus target area versus whatever, I'm a big fan of total body workouts in general. So I'm far from a strength expert, but there is a gentleman that I follow. His name's Mike Boyle out of Boston, that I think is an incredibly smart guy. And what he basically broke it down is that they don't split up strength training in terms of like upper body, lower body, core, etc. until a person gets to 5 days a week of strength training. At 5 days a week of strength training, they'll start to split down by body part. Until then, everything is a full body activity. And when you think about running, 100% it is lower body associated, but it is absolutely a full body activity. So I was actually talking to one of my ultra runners that I coached earlier today. We were talking a lot about preparing for his ultra season and some of the physical demands that go along with that. And both of us talked about in the past, actually some of our sorest muscles have been lats, shoulders, chest, etc. from extremely long or very challenging efforts. Those are muscles that are very much involved in the running motion. So while you should absolutely include lower body focused stuff, working on feet, ankles, glutes certainly, etc. The total body is what we really need to strengthen to be the best runner, best athlete we can be. So I would definitely recommend that full body strengthening. Next question was just kind of some general advice actually on kind of structured workouts that would best prep for a successful 10K. So when I think about how to kind of come up with training plans for programs in general, it's always energy zone focused and what the energy zones are that are associated with that particular event. So in the 10K is absolutely an endurance event first and foremost. So the endurance running piece is big. So the easy runs, long runs, etc. That's going to be part of your program. Also, threshold energy zone, a hugely important energy zone in the 10K in particular. So for my main structured workout of the week, I'd be targeting threshold style of workouts and starting to build upon that on a weekly basis. And then the final thing, especially for athletes that are faster than 60 minutes in the 10K. You might ask why that matters. And ultimately, we talk about threshold definition being, in essence, how far can you run in 1 hour? Well, roughly around the 10-minute mile part. Obviously, I'm taking away that extra quarter. You can call it 950. Is where you're going faster in the 1 hour in the 10K. So that means you're running now above threshold in that work. That means you're moving into zone 5. So it makes sense to spend definitely some time working on VO2 max. So if you're moving into that sub 60 10K, making sure that you're including VO2 max as part of your training as the second structured workout is how I would do it of the week. So your threshold absolutely is the most critical. VO2 max would be kind of the add-on if you were going to do a second structured workout in the week. And then naturally you would keep your long run. Once you get through that part, you would add on extra easy or endurance runs over the course of the week to kind of get to the ultimate volume that you're hoping to achieve during that training period. But that's how I would look at a 10K. So definitely endurance, threshold, VO2 max would be the top 3 energy zones I would target there. Otherwise, the 2024 Holiday Run Challenge is off to a start here. So thanks for joining. Can't wait to get started. Can't wait to see you back here next week. Have a great one.